Coming up next on American Black Journal, an in-depth discussion about the Detroit of the future. How does Detroit's new strategic framework plan fit into the bigger picture for the city? What impact will it have on economic development? George Jackson and Dan Kinkead are here to answer these questions and much more about Detroit Future City. You don't want to miss this important conversation, so stay tuned.
Eric wants to know,
what does DTE Energy do to make Michigan a better place?
Rodney can tell you.
We do a lot, like youth education and employment programs. We fund over 500 jobs for youth all across the state. Many are neighborhood improvement projects just like this.
It's incredible.
Wow, that is fantastic. So this is like a paint by number, this whole thing, right? Communities are such great places, aren't they?
They sure are.
Love the siding. Measure once, cut twice, right? DTE Energy. Know your own power.
When I grow up,
I want to be an architectural engineer.
Registered nurse.
The law enforcement.
a computer scientist.
A successful person.
Give Michigan's children the chance to aim high with quality early education.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. Earlier this year, Mayor Dave Bing's Detroit Works Project long-term planning team unveiled a strategic framework for the city's future. The comprehensive plan is called Detroit Future City, and it's the result of years of community and civic input. Now the focus has shifted to aligning pilot projects with the objectives of the plan. Joining me now to provide the latest on Detroit's Future City are George Jackson, who's president and CEO of the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, and Dan Kinkead, who's director of the Detroit Future City Implementation Office. Welcome to American Black Journal. I should say welcome back. You've both been here before.
Oh, yeah, we've been here before.
This show's a lot easier when it's people I know.
Yeah,
you guys will talk, right?
Thanks for having us.
That's right. So where are we right now with Detroit Future City? I know that the book that came out, I guess this spring, is all over town. Everybody I know seems like they're picking it up and reading it and talking about it. But the question I get most frequently is, okay, so now what? What are we supposed to do with this?
Well, one thing is that Detroit, this plan is a plan, but it has a bias towards implementation. As you know, over the years in Detroit, we've had a lot and we have a plan for the plan, and a plan for that plan.
Right. Somewhere in City Hall, I figure they're all like stacked up, yeah. Right?
But no, it is really something that we are implementing, and that is happening as we speak.
Right.
But really important to note is that it is this is a document that is really a comprehensive decision-making document. It is a good basis of decision-making. There's a lot of information,
right,
but also for making future decisions about the city of Detroit and the direction we're going in. This is an excellent document.
Okay, so give me a quick example of something that is happening now because of Detroit Future City.
Well, I think Dan and his staff have been working on land use policies already, engaged with the emergency manager,
right,
working with city departments, things of this nature. So the master plan, land use would be some of them, as well as some of the strategies in regards to even getting down to the level of specific implementation strategies.
Right. So am I wrong to call this a master plan? Because I feel like it's sort of a master plan, but it's
right,
more than that, right? It's bigger than that.
It is. Well, I'm not sure whether it's bigger in nature, but it is fundamentally different because typically in cities, when you develop a master plan, it lays out very clear directives, right? Folks are going to do this.
We're going to do
public
X, Y, and
sector,
Z.
even private sector, absolutely. In this case, what we've developed is a framework. It's a framework that accommodates decision making, and in a way, it recognizes that there are a number of decision makers across the city, right? Whether they're public or private, employers, and so on and so forth, and that those decision makers can have this framework to help guide what they do to maximize their investment throughout. And as we have transitioned from, as you'd mentioned, really launching the framework plan this January, and then developing our implementation office, starting with the core of our team here in May, we have the opportunity now to really translate all of the input and the information we've received from all the stakeholders into this document and actually translate that into action. And so by creating a framework, you've also kind of extended the impact and range of the work immediately.
Right, right. One of the things that I've that I find most interesting about the plan is the way that it looks at different parts of the city and imagines a different future or a potential different future for different parts of the city. And that doesn't always mean that a place that's a neighborhood now with houses might be that in the future. I mean, it sort of boldly says, maybe this should be something else.
Well, it does that. I mean, from a standpoint of really looking at alternatives.
Right.
Alternative uses of the land, for example.
Right.
But also it is very clearly indicates that not all neighborhoods will have the same plan.
Right.
You know, I mean, that we have to look at the characteristics of every community and make a decision based on the realities and facts that that exist in that particular community. So it should be customized by community as opposed to one size fits all.
Right, right. And there are some areas of the city that the plan suggests maybe lighter density,
yes.
Fewer people, not houses up and down every block.
Well, and in fact, there are many parts of the city that already, you know, illustrate those
They're
realities.
like that now,
yeah.
right?
And I think that the thing to keep in mind with Detroit Future City is that it's looking at the entire city, and it's trying to ensure that the composition of the city itself can provide a strong quality of life for all residents and businesses. We need a fundamental value proposition as to why we're here, right?
Right.
On top of that, we need to make sure that the city is fiscally sustainable. That the city can thrive, that it can continue and provide those things that people need. And as we consider that, we need to recognize that, like many other cities, certain parts of the city play certain roles, right? We need to understand that we are going to have centers of economic growth in the city, employment districts, right? In some ways we already have them. We need to define them a little bit more clearly and make sure that we can guide active policy and even projects around it, you know, make sure that the infrastructure is there to support that growth. That growth is important to provide jobs for Detroiters, but also to make sure that we can draw in revenue to sustain the city. Now, that's a revenue side of it, but if you look at it from a cost side, we recognize we need to get a better handle on our land overall. Yeah. This city, we live, you know, in a city now that has over 20 square miles of perfectly vacant, occupiable land, nothing on it, right? If you add into that some of the vacant structures or even some of the streets that are adjacent to that, you're closing in on 40, even 60 square miles.
Right, yeah.
That is a lot of land, and we have to understand that it isn't land in which no one has ever lived before. In fact, it's the residual space that's drawn back, so all of the systems that are below grade are there. The fire calls go out there, the police go out there. Sure. That is a cost the city simply cannot bear, and as we know, we are in municipal bankruptcy right now. So Detroit Future City is looking very clearly at those things, as George says, paying attention to the realities, in understanding how very important transformational concepts can emerge from those realities.
Right, right. What about, when I think back to Detroit Works, which is where this all started several years ago, and that first meeting that Mayor Bing had in Northwest Detroit, the big question on everybody's mind was, am I going to have to move? Am I going to be asked to move? Is the city going to decide that, you know, my neighborhood doesn't really have a future? What does Detroit Future City offer as an answer to that question?
Right. Well, it certainly does not say that you have to move. Okay, that's very important. But what it does recognize is that there are many parts of our city today in which the zoning may say R1 or R2, right, for residential, or B2 or B3 for a commercial corridor. But there's not a lot of R going on. There's not a lot of B going on. And what in fact is happening is there's quite a bit of suffering in place. You have people that are typically older, with poor mobility. Right. These are people of color typically, who really don't have access to retail amenities and services, and particularly health services. The quality of life there is extremely poor, and at the same time, these are areas in which the cost to serve for the city is about 5 times greater per household there than it is in other parts of the city, drawing in often a 20th of the revenue overall. These are places where you have a population that really needs public transportation, but doesn't have the density to properly support it through fare box returns. Right. So as an example for us with the implementation team, where we begin to look at this is say, okay, look, over the long haul, these are areas that have already begun to change, and that could be part of a broader kind of open space system that really provides a value and amenity for residents. But also in the near term, we can take very strategic steps to provide transportation alternatives here.
For the people who are still there.
Absolutely. On-call service, paratransit networks, where you're not driving a full-size unibody bus down the street every 5 times a day to pick up one woman who needs to go to the doctor on a Tuesday, but instead there's she can call. the bus, excuse me,
it's
like
a
a
more
van.
targeted service.
Yeah, they come pick her up, take her to the doctor, bring her back at a fraction of the cost to that transportation provider than what it would be to bring the bus down.
Yeah.
Well, another thing too is that to anyone who thinks that we're going to move them, first of all, we don't have the money to do that.
Well, that's right. It costs money. You have to buy their house. You have to.
And if you look at the Marathon experience, and Marathon's done a very good job. The city of Detroit cannot afford to do that.
Right.
I mean, that's a very expensive proposition. But
and the Marathon project you're talking about in Southwest Detroit, where
yes.
Marathon has offered people near its refinery the opportunity to move.
And I think it's something like 65,000 a resident, things of that nature. That adds up.
And you feel like that's working pretty well?
Well, I think it's working very well. Yeah. No, I mean, it's not perfect, but at the same time, they'll never get an offer like that.
Right. For their houses on the.
I mean, for any time, in the foreseeable future like that, in terms of what the value of the home is.
Right.
But I think here too is that, Dan mentioned something here, is that this also sets the premise for more efficient use of the property. When he mentioned such things as zoning and things of those nature, some of those areas would be targeted for more business growth. I mean, one of the things we have to do is look at the zoning throughout the city to make it more amenable to change, to make it more easier for access for both residents and also businesses to start or grow a business in. And I think this is another very important part of Detroit Future City, in that we're more competitive if we're ready to take advantage of opportunity.
Yeah,
and I think that's something that we haven't done in the past.
How often,
being proactive.
How often in your work do you find somebody come to you and say, hey, you know what, I want to do this in Detroit. I want to put a factory here. I want to put a business here. And the hurdle to that is land assemblage or zoning or some sort of...
Often.
Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. That is a hurdle, because most of the time people who want to make those types of investments, they also have a time frame in which they need to make that decision.
Sure.
And we're competing, if not competing with areas outside of the city of Detroit, within the state of Michigan, we're competing with another state, if not another country. And so from that standpoint, being readily available sites, and having site packaging and zoning and things of this nature done proactively up on the front end, it makes us more competitive.
Right. I want to ask you about the Hance farm, which is now a tree farm, I guess. That's gonna be over on the east side.
Yeah.
Is this something that, in your mind, fits in with the broader vision of something like Detroit Future City, and is it something that helps us again get to the place where we can move faster? I mean, that's clearing a lot of land. It's planting trees is pretty low impact, right? I mean, it's not something that can't be changed. It seems like it took us a long time to get there, but that's maybe a step in that direction.
Well, I think the process is that we went through to get, whether you like it or not, the process we went through was very long.
Yeah. Well,
it was extremely long. It was very cumbersome. That's what we need to get away from. And almost everything that involves both the changing the city in regards to looking at options in terms of land use, but also in terms of attracting and retaining business.
Right.
That has to be changed. I mean, so from that standpoint, that is just one option that we have in regards to alternative uses for property. I mean, for example, we actually have done this before there was a Detroit Future City called the I-94 Industrial Park. That was a residential community, but it was painstakingly in terms of the land acquisition piece, dealing with title issues and things of this nature. And this may be an opportunity. That's another issue that has to be addressed, and not only in Detroit but other urban cities. Again, that time frame is a very important and because it's
being able to move
faster.
Well, and I just want to add to this too that I think regulatory reform for Detroit Future City is fundamentally important. It's really the platform upon which every other action sits. Yeah. And you can see how this can either be an encumbrance or a great vehicle to move the city forward. Right. We look at it, at the master plan of policies and the zoning, right, from the executive to the legislative side. Both documents really do need to change substantively. We know that the master plan of policies was updated fairly recently. but both of them are deeply connected back to a city far in the past. They're anachronistic. They're based in an economy that really doesn't exist, in a demographic profile that doesn't exist. We need to move forward and make sure that we can have the proper regulation in place that really guides future development in a way that's sustainable and actually begins to link specific assets together. So we understand how an employment district connects to a neighborhood through a transit corridor. That's what Detroit Future City lays out.
Right. How long do you think that process would take? I mean, and that's really the policy end of this, right? That is the mayor and the city council reviewing all the ordinances, reviewing all the zoning, and coming up with a new way of doing that.
Well, there's a couple different ways to approach it. One is comprehensively on both pieces to completely transform them. Ultimately, that's what you need to work to. The other end is to do it in a little bit more of a piecemeal fashion, right? Focus in on certain pieces.
Right.
I think we're somewhere in between on this right now, where we know that we need to address those parts of those documents that are most divergent from where we need to go as a city. That would really include those areas for employment districts, economic growth, and those areas where we do need to really rethink the land use policy around open space, right? Around places where people have lived and where they do not live today, to make sure that certain things, whether we've given the example of Hans, where certain things can come in without restrictions, where also, to be honest, where you can lay out zoning that means that clearly illustrates that down the road, these are places where people will not be living, but these are places that can then be productive parts of our city, providing urban agricultural spaces, places where we can grow energy, biomass, and switchgrass, places that can be part of overall green infrastructure systems to help mitigate our stormwater runoff.
Right.
And in some ways, Detroit Future City is already pushing these things forward through individual projects, almost as piloting efforts to guide the policy piece around the other side. I'll give you an example. Recently, we formed a partnership to develop an opportunity around the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. This is drawing in federal EPA dollars to deliver a fairly significant green infrastructure site on the Lower East Side. We came in and worked with SEMCOG, the Herb Family Foundation, Kresge Foundation, DEGC, a whole host of different folks, to really begin to figure out how we could do that, how we could bring the funding together and make sure that where this action takes place, it can really have an impact, right?
On people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely, and so that's a kind of leading edge to what can follow behind that.
Last week I hosted a forum in Northwest Detroit with just average Detroiters and asking them a series of questions about stuff that's going on in the city with the election, with the bankruptcy, but there was also a question in there that said, do you see yourself as part of Detroit's future? And sort of a corollary question was, do you feel like you have input in what Detroit's future was? And I was shocked. I mean, this was a pretty high information group of residents. They understood a lot of stuff. They knew all about the bankruptcy. They even down to numbers. They were very informed. But when I asked them that question, 100% of them said no, that they didn't see themselves as part of the city's future, and that they didn't feel like they had any control over it, which really struck me as a disconnect, right? And I think that's pretty common, that people don't necessarily feel like they have, that Detroit's future city is about them.
Right. Well, or at least that the future of the city, regardless of DFC, is.
And they're scared. I think it's a reflection of fear. Right?
Absolutely, and
it is.
I think it's also a testament to what we really need to bolster in our own implementation effort. The project we developed over the last 2.5 years, as you had mentioned in the opening, is really anchored on fundamentally, participatory planning.
Right. And there were a lot of people that had a chance to come out to meetings and help shape this.
Absolutely. And in many ways, folks may not recall the fact that they are part of the city's future, and the fact that their voice has driven this work. I mean, this is the people's document. This is how it was set up.
Right.
This took civic engagement to a level that was unheard of.
And I remember all of those meetings, and they went on and on. And I was one of the people who was sort of critical, saying, "Gosh, we're having all these meetings. When are we going to get to some actual?"
I was there too, and I was very much involved in it.
And I think, I think we've actually gained a huge opportunity from that, because it's borne fruit where now we know we have that driving message in the work, and we can lead that forward into implementation. But as we do it, for Detroit Future City as an implementation office, We started really in May when I was brought in, and my leadership partner Heidi Alcock. We formed our staff to find a budget. We're getting an office running. We're also pushing about 60 pilot efforts, focusing on 20 right now. There is a lot of work being done, but we're also moving forward on our engagement effort to restart that whole operation, because we know that the participatory planning that we've done gives us a unique opportunity now to have participatory implementation. There is no other way to do this, and so I want to make sure that every Detroiter, the Detroiters you spoke with, do feel that they are part of the city. They
feel like they're part.
Absolutely.
And some of that I also feel is, I mean, we've seen that come up during the mayoral campaign. This balance between downtown development, which you're extremely involved in, and people thinking that the neighborhoods don't get.
Right.
And I think to some extent people are saying my neighborhood doesn't seem like it has a future.
Well, I think this gets us to another point that also is part of the objective of Detroit Future City, and that is the restructuring side
right.
of city government and city services. I think a lot of that alienation and the feeling of alienation is because they feel they're not getting any.
They're not getting anything. If you live in these neighborhoods, I think it's hard to point to what the city is doing.
And one of the things we're doing is we're being actively involved with the Detroit's emergency manager, who has basically blessed this and has been a big supporter of Detroit Future City, as well as the governor.
Right.
Has been a big supporter of Detroit Future City. And that's one of the avenues that we're in, and working with his staff and working with the departments. And we have to be a key part of this reorganization or restructuring of city services.
Right.
Right.
Right. In other words, they've got to use this as
people feel so. Yeah. I mean, people feel they're not. Take for example, you mentioned this downtown versus neighborhood. That goes on in every city.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every city you hear that argument.
Right.
Well, what about more effective and efficient use of block grant funds? Could be a key factor.
Right.
And it's not even a rocket scientist issue to figure out how you could better utilize block grant funds.
Because most of that block grant funding is for neighborhoods. It's
most
not
of it is for neighborhoods.
Right.
But the way it has been implemented over the years, or not implemented because you couldn't get it through the administrative pipeline, it hasn't. It doesn't materialize in helping the neighborhoods the way that it could.
Right.
But having the key word here is impact.
Yeah.
So if it's spread out among hundreds of groups, as opposed to saying, which is one of the things that I've always been an advocate of, focusing on, there's nothing that we have done downtown that we can't do in neighborhoods if we take the block grant money and utilize that funding in a more effective, efficient manner.
We've got about 3 minutes left. I want to get you both to address, we've got a big election coming up on Tuesday, electing new mayor, new city council by district for the first time in almost a century. What do you see as the potential for success with Detroit Future City, or what do you need to see from these new public officials that will let you sort of feel like they're embracing this, that they're going to push it forward? I mean, it seems to me that that's the key, is we've got to get that leadership to really take hold of this.
Key.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think we need to make sure that our leaders are embracing innovation here. The thought process we need to have around Detroit's future needs to be one that isn't tied to decision making that's gone past in the last 20 to 30 years. And as we look forward, we need to focus on making sure we understand that, look, most fundamentally for our city, we have to employ more Detroiters. Today, we have 4 people for every 1 private sector job. There are more folks between the ages of 25 and 64 not working than those who are. That has to change. No matter what else we do, if we can't change that, we will not be able to improve our future. And so I know for Detroit Future City, we're stepping in actually and working with a national financial entity to begin to drive through, and I think DGC is part of this too, drive through a 10,000 small businesses campaign here that really is geared. We've customized it to Detroit's situation to make sure we can have small business growth, MBE growth. That's critical. Beyond that, we need to make sure that leaders understand that we have a fundamental city systems change that needs to occur. Strategic renewal is important. We need to make sure that we're incorporating also blight elimination and public safety issues within our neighborhoods.
George,
but to get there,
last word,
with whoever is mayor, they have to embrace this plan and integrate it in the decision-making process.
Right.
Yeah.
That is.
It can't just be this thing off to the side.
It can't just be this thing off to the side. All that the stuff is in it is good, but at the same time, they have to say, look, department heads, we're going to do this restructuring. We're going to look at this innovation, but also we're going to integrate it in our plans in terms of how we serve the
In
residents
terms
of the city of
decision
Detroit.
that we make.
In every decision we make.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Great, guys. Been a long journey.
Yes.
And
yes,
we
it
got a
is.
lot of work
Long
ahead
way to
too,
go.
right? Yeah, no, that's
Long
right.
way to go.
This is a very good start.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
This Tuesday, Detroiters go to the polls to select a new mayor and city council members. For the first time in nearly 100 years, voters will elect city council members by district. American Black Journal and Detroit Public TV want you to be informed about the council candidates, so we've produced a series of debates that you can look at online at myvote.org. That's MIVOTE.org. That's our show for today. Thanks for watching. We'd love to hear what you thought about today's program and get your ideas for future shows. So connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. We'll see you next time on American Black Journal.
Eric wants to know.
What does DTE Energy do to make Michigan a better place?
Rodney can tell you.
We do a lot, like youth education and employment programs. We fund over 500 jobs for youth all across the state. Many are neighborhood improvement projects just like this.
It's incredible.
Wow, that is fantastic. So this is like a paint by number, this whole thing, right? Communities are such great places, aren't they?
They sure are.
Love the siding. Measure once, cut twice, right? DTE Energy. Know your own power.
When I grow up,
I want to be an architectural engineer.
Registered nurse.
The law enforcement.
a computer scientist.
A successful person.
Give Michigan's children the chance to aim high with quality early education.